Hello everyone, welcome back to Grim Dawn. Now, as promised in the last episode, I'm going to be talking about roughly when and where I change my builds, because as I've stated numerous times before, I tend to play a sort of quasi-improv where I'm kind of making up my build as I go along depending on what kind of items I find. Um, and that's what I've been doing so far, and you can see there are pros and cons to this. It does, in the early game, give me a certain amount of freedom to adjust my build in the early game according to what I'm particularly struggling with, but unfortunately, as you've also seen, there is the downside of occasionally having equipment that doesn't quite match what you're trying to do. As an example, I think, yeah, my chest armor right now increases fire damage. I actually found this here that I'm going to equip right now, which made me lose my helmet, but that's fine. I still can't equip these pants because there's absolutely no way in 7 points I'm going to be able to make it to that, but that's fine. But you can see definitely where there's an issue with my equipment. I mean, this increases cold damage, which I'm currently doing, but it also increases vitality damage, which I'm not currently doing. So there are pros and cons to the quasi-improv. Now, ignoring the relics for a second, once you have recipes, once you start gathering recipes, which if you've played through the game at least once, you've got some. If this is your first run, you probably don't. In which case, you can just look these up online if you really want to pre-plan your build. If you're a pre-planner, you can go on ahead and find sets online at grimtools.com. But what we would do is, well, what I intend on doing is finding a themed build, so to speak. Now I'm actually going to go down here and very specifically point out, where is this? There's one specific piece. Yes, right here. The Clairvoyance set. Notice that this is a level 65 set, right? So when I hit, this is approximately level 70, by the way. This is what I meant by roughly level 70. I would have to gather up the rest of these, obviously, so there is that issue, which is why usually, even if the equipment is level like 68 or something like this, it would still be about level 70 by the time that I actually get to equip it. But this would be a really strong indication of very specifically what I would be adjusting to. In this particular case, I would be like, oh, I can recreate this. Now, there's an easy way to recreate this. I'm going to talk about that when the time comes. We're not going to worry about that yet. But I could say, alright, when I hit level 50, I should probably start readjusting my build to do Vitality and Aether damage, focusing on Albrecht's Aether Ray and Doombolt. We could do that, absolutely, and that's something I will definitely be looking to do. This is level 75. I could go full Poison Vitality build at level 75 if I really wanted to. And it's just really nice to have these particular pieces. And here we have the Iskandra's Unification, which you notice is pure elemental damage, very specifically focusing around Trozan's Sky Shard, which interestingly enough is adjusting Trozan's to be fire damage. Right? You can actually see that, where that becomes 2/3 fire damage. Right? Because 33% of your cold and lightning damage is becoming fire damage. It's a really interesting time, but it is focusing broadly on elemental damage in general. So when I hit level 90, I may want to readjust. In fact, you can actually see where Frozen Core is increased as well. So if I kept my current build as I've got it now, I would actually be okay. Because if you look overall, we've got Frozen Core, there's Shattered Star here. It's focusing on these two because it's all elemental damage. Iskandra's Elemental Exchange works really well. I could go into Reckless Power or into Star Pact if I really wanted to. I don't remember the specifics of the individual pieces off the top of my head beyond the hood, obviously. I can't remember what the rest of it does. But you'll also notice that we have the Focusing Prism, that is an offhand. I believe that's an offhand. Either the texts or the Focusing Prism is the offhand for this set. Again, I'm having a brain fart. What? I can't speak today. A brain fart, and I can't remember which one of those is the offhand. However, one of them is. So at some point down the road, I would be looking to switch to a single-hand weapon, and focusing primarily on utilizing my my spells. Now, the question you might ask yourself is, okay, you're currently a warlock. You have Arcanist and you have Occultist. How would you work Occultist into this build? Right? Because this is focusing on Elemental, and those familiar with Occultists are probably instantly thinking, oh, you're going to use the Storm Spirit. And yeah, that's where I'm going to go if I decide to go with this. There are a bunch of other sets at level 90 plus for this combination. This one is just, sort of in the bag, so to speak, because I can start this. And again, there is an easy way to recreate this set. Veterans know what I'm talking about and probably understand why I don't want to talk about it yet. I'd rather show you because explaining it is a little bit complicated. You'll see it in the future. Don't worry about that. I'll show you before level 94, obviously. I'll show you when I get a set that actually works. But I have all kinds of options like this. Here we have just an Occultist one. Could have swore I had one for the specific combination that I had that was level 94. Plus, here's a pet-focused one, but that's not really what I want to do with this combination. It's just not as effective. I'm thinking of something. Anyways, you can just absolutely go through your whole line of recipes and see, well, I've got these, so maybe I can make something work with that, or maybe you want to start working towards that. Now that I know I can easily recreate the Iskandri's set just as a reference, I can go on ahead and look at some other things. Here we've got an Occultist one. I can look at a couple of the single-hand weapons and see what maybe would work really well for me in the future. Things like that. That wouldn't be bad. That would be really nice because that's elemental damage. And you can just go on ahead and pick and choose what you might want to use in the future, right? And that's absolutely lovely. And if you want to run like this, that's fine. I've done it before. It's not a bad idea. If I chose a set that didn't have an offhand, that'd be a really great thing. And you can just run through that. We can also look through, obviously, our jewelry as well. We've got all kinds of lovely bits of jewelry that we can equip here. Not a whole lot of them particular to me or my combination. That's okay. So what we absolutely, like I said, what we absolutely could do is just go off on this route. Now, again, I'm already kind of working towards that. That was accidental. I didn't pre-plan this. I didn't even realize that I was accidentally wandering towards the Iskandra's build at the time. But it works out really well anyways, so, it's not a particular bother. I might actually stick with this build all the way through level 50, and there are a couple of benefits for me to do so. First off, again, at the end of this character's leveling process, I will have a level 94 set that increases elemental damage, focusing very specifically on Electra's Flash Freeze and Trozan's Sky Shard. Which one of these two ultimates I'm not sure I would use. I could also splash in for a relatively low investment of Occultist points. We're only going up to 25 here. I could go for the full-on Storm Spirit, Summon Familiar, but at the very least I would be getting to here, so I wouldn't even necessarily need all the way to Lightning Strikes. Maybe I would, maybe I won't. It really depends on how many points I have at the end of the day. I'll want Maven's Sphere, obviously, at some point. And I can just absolutely run with that, and that actually will become very effective. And then I can actually I probably would want to readjust my devotion points, to be honest. If I was going to go full elemental, I would want the Blind Sage, and I want a Toxeru. More leaning on the Blind... Well, actually, the Blind Sage and Ultos would be really good. We need 10 blue. We have 10 blue there. We need 3 red. We can get that 3 red fairly easily. We need some green for him, don't we? Yeah. We need green for both of them. That's fine. Alright. I was working on him earlier, wasn't I? The imp does 3 more blue. Do I need that much blue? I don't need that much blue, to be honest. But with that much blue, I could eventually work my way to, and this is part of the planning process, the Widow. No? Yes. Well, I need just... No, I don't even need that. I just need the green. Alright, well, I want this for elemental. I want this for elemental. That's some purple, which I do need. I do need some purple. Alright, no, we're okay with that, I guess. What other sources of green? I need 10 green, right? Yeah. I just need the double... No, I need more than that, don't I? Yeah, 18 green. Yeah, we'll just go ahead and go with the imp here, because I need enough green where the overlap of blue isn't really likely to be a problem. I could always readjust it later, but I'm just not expecting that to be much of an issue. We'll go for this spider at some point in the near future as well. That 6 points is difficult to beat. That would put us at 9 already there. We could go for the Scholar's Light and the Quill for some more. That would be 12 and 15. And then we could do the Magi. If I got some more red, I could go for Oldsman Storage. We'll figure that out as we go along. I'm not, like I said, I'm not too particularly concerned about it. But the reason why I didn't really mind stopping and talking about builds and, again, the pre-planning of this is because this is going to be a particularly short trip to the next rift, and I don't really want to extend the episode too much. It was a potentially shorter episode since the Blood Grove is, it can be a little long to get through, so I wanted to have that be its own episode. Just that I wouldn't have one super long episode in the middle of, like, this stream of smaller bits. Unfortunately, that's kind of what happened with the last episode, just by the nature of that particular area, but that's fine. But ultimately, how you want to approach building is totally up to you. Whether you want to go full improv and literally just make it up as you go along, if you want to do semi-improv like me, where you're kind of building a rough idea and then you just crystallize that at the end, or if you plan out your every individual level all the way to the end, none of these ways is a wrong way to play. I know a lot of people prefer the full pre-plan. They like to know where every point is going at every specific level and what skills they want at each point, and that's totally fine. If you want to do that, having a recipe for a level 90 plus piece of equipment really can help you plan that out, because you can look ahead of time and say, well, I can easily make this set. And I know this set is going to use these abilities here, so I can start leveling these up and then figuring out what accessory abilities I want on top of that, right? In this particular case, with Iskandra's, where I'm going with Iskandra's Elemental Exchange and I'll be going Maven's Sphere, maybe instead of these, you would just jump right into the Familiar and run with that, which, by the way, there's a spare point in there, but I'll leave that alone because I'm not really... Well, if I pulled the point out, I would be able to finish off... Well, we'll wait until my next level up. I'm not too concerned about it. I apparently missed the fact that that has that has 2 points in it. But anyways, where I might go for those two, you might go for the Summoned Familiar right away, or you might go Panetti's Replicating Missile. You could even go Albrecht's Aether Ray. That would be totally fine. Maybe you want Kalidor's Tempest instead. That's all fine. The beauty of Grim Dawn is... really, there is no wrong way to approach it. Now... the interesting thing, there's one other thing I want to address before ending the episode, because I'm going to end it right here. One other interesting point about siding very specifically with the Necromancers is you get to see ahead of time what kind of enemies you'll be fighting in the late game of the Forgotten Gods DLC. Now, I don't know if you classify this as a spoiler or not, if you've never played the game, or if you even care about that kind of thing. In essence, at the end of the Forgotten Gods DLC, the primary enemy group becomes the Kimin's Chosen People. They use primarily fire and physical damage, as well as a lot of the grunts you see. I'll go on ahead and show you a brief example, actually, because there's some in the woods up here. I'm not going to go too far into the woods, I just want to show you some Kimin's Chosen. But the Kimin's Chosen you find in the woods here are some of the same Kimin's Chosen you will see at the end of the DLC of Forgotten Gods, just stronger, basically. So you get a bit of a preview of what you'll be encountering at the end of that DLC if you have it and if you go there, which is nice. It does also make sure, it also allows you, as you progress through the game, to check whether or not you could handle them later on, assuming you keep your resistances relatively stable. Now, for Veteran, that's kind of nonsense, because obviously your resistances are going to change pretty aggressively. I see these people, the Kimin's Chosen. We're talking physical damage, piercing damage, fire. He's going to shoot at me. He's got a little lightning on this one. You can see it in his shots. That's fine. We're going to freeze all these goons. There we go. But you're going to see more of them in the late game of the Forgotten Gods DLC, the end game of the Forgotten Gods DLC. So once again, I have to emphasize the fact that while in Veteran it doesn't really make a difference, and not really so much in Epic either, and I'll talk about that when we get to the Epic difficulty, in Ultimate, since you're going to be approaching your final level and your equipment isn't really going to change that much, in Ultimate difficulty, stopping by here before moving on to the Forgotten Gods DLC endgame, if you're going to do that, isn't necessarily a bad idea, because it will, again, allow you to gauge at Ultimate difficulty whether or not you can handle that, because these guys are going to be, generally speaking, weaker, they're more limited, so if they're really a hard time for you, you can run to one of the Necromancer groups that you've got kicking around, and they'll help you out. Because there's, just as interspersed amongst the woods, and I'm wondering if I can find any, yeah, right here, interspersed throughout the woods, if you sided with Death's Vigil, you'll have Death's Vigil people, and that's, you know, you can, if, for example, this group down here, as just an example, if I was in the Ultimate difficulty, and I was having a problem with this group of guys, I could run up here, assumedly with higher movement speed than whatever lame movement speed I've got here, run over here and go to the Death's Vigil guys, and they would help protect me and even the odds a little bit. So you have that advantage as well, if you need it. Most people at Ultimate difficulty aren't going to, just because by that time they will know what to expect, having gone through it in Veteran at the very least, and they really aren't going to have that much of an issue. But it is nice to know. Also, typically, I prefer the Death's Vigil people for two reasons not related to... The moral choice here is kind of like Stormcloaks versus the Empire in Skyrim, if you've played that. Very similar kind of... Well, neither side is necessarily particularly good. The Death's Vigil faction is definitely portrayed as slightly more good, just as the Stormcloaks are portrayed as slightly more evil in Skyrim, kind of similar thing. You know, that I'm not going to get into that because I really don't care. Gameplay-wise, there are... Just the fact that they summon these skeletons, these bad boys right here, skeletal warriors and such, that does give them a bit of an advantage over the Kimin's Chosen, because not only are the Acolytes fighting, the Neophytes and the Acolytes, but so are the skeletons. So they have a pretty significant numbers advantage, and some of the stronger Death's Vigil guys summon Death Knights. Well, I'm sorry, not Death Knights, Skeleton Knights, who, as we all know, are just really difficult to kill. So they do have that inherent advantage, and we'll see more of that later on in the game. But just keep that in mind. These guys do, if you choose to side with Kimin's Chosen and against the Death's Vigil do run a... They do allow you to test yourself out on the undead, but there are other places to do that with. So, I mean, it's not really as significant as being able to test yourself out on these Kimin's Chosen for the late game Forgotten Gods content, but that's just something that I've noticed. With that being said, thank you all very much for joining me. If you liked this, please like and subscribe. If you didn't, please ignore me. And if you have any comments, questions, concerns, ideas, suggestions, or requests, please leave them down in the comment section below. And thank you all very much for joining me, and have a great 24 hours.